Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at solving some equations that are factorable. Alright, so the first one we're going to look at is 7x cubed equals 2x squared. Before we factor anything, we always want to get everything on the same side of our equation, combine all like terms, and have it equal to 0. So 7x cubed is going to be our biggest power of x. So I'm going to move everything on that side. I like to keep my biggest power equal or have a positive coefficient. And so I'm going to subtract 2x squared from both sides. So we get 7x cubed minus 2x squared equals 0. And then we factor. And when we factor, we always look for the greatest common factor. In this case, we do have a common factor of x squared. When we factor that out, we're left with 7x minus 2. We factor this completely, so now we can set each of those factors equal to 0. X squared equals 0. We need to take the square root of both sides. Remember, when we take the square root, we got to put plus or minus there. Square root of x squared is going to be x equals, technically we've got plus or minus the square root of 0, but that's just 0 either way. And so I'm going to go ahead and just leave that as 0. And then 7x minus 2 equals 0. We're going to subtract 2 and divide by 7. So we'll get x equals negative 2 over 7. And those will be our solutions. I have a misprint on my next example. We want that to be 3x cubed plus 24x equals 4x squared plus 32. So just like we started the previous one, we want to get everything on the same side. So let's go ahead and move everything to the same side. I'll go ahead and put it in standard form as we go. Again, I want to keep my leading term positive just because it makes it a little bit easier when we get a factor. And so 3x cubed is going to be my leading term. And then we're going to subtract 4x squared to move it to the other side. 24x is going to stay right where it is, so it's going to stay the same sign. And then we need to move that 32 over, so we'll get minus 32 equals 0. We want to look first for a greatest common factor. Unfortunately, 3x cubed and 32 have no common factors. And so there's no way we could have a GCF other than 1 for this. Next, we want to look at the number of terms that we have. In this case, we have 4 terms. And so that suggests that we use factor by grouping. And so I'm going to group the first 2 and the last 2. 3x cubed minus 4x squared has a GCF of x squared. When we factor that out, we're left with 3x minus 4. 24x minus 32 has a GCF of 8, so I'm going to factor out a positive 8 because I want to be left with the same 3x minus 4. Now don't forget, these factors that are left over have to be the same if the factor by grouping method is going to work. If they're not the same, either factor by grouping does not work or there's a mistake somewhere. Because our next step, now we want to factor out that common factor of 3x minus 4 from each of our 2 terms. When we do that, we're left with x squared plus 8. Setting each of those equal to 0, 3x minus 4 is going to give us a solution. We're going to add 4 and divide by 3. X squared plus 8, we're going to move that 8 to the other side by subtracting it. And then we want to take the square root of both sides. Square root of x squared is going to be equal to plus or minus. That negative underneath the square root means that we're going to have an imaginary number here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out an I. The square root of 8 is not a perfect square, but it does have a perfect square that goes into it. 8 can be written as 4 times 2. And so we can take the square root of that 4 and bring a 2 out, and then that other 2 will be left underneath our square root. Now in this, you want to pay attention to what the directions of your problem say. In many of the cases, many of the problems that I assign, the directions will ask you for all the real solutions. in which case your only solution is x equals 4/3 for this problem. If they ask you for all of the solutions on the complex plane, then you would include that plus or minus 2i square roots of 2. And one thing you can kind of use to check on both of these problems, anytime you have a polynomial equation like we do on both of these examples, the biggest degree is going to tell you how many solutions you have. So the one we just did, we had a degree of 3, and we get 3 answers. We've got 4/3, and then we have a positive 2i square roots of 2 and a negative 2i square roots of 2 for our 3 answers. On the first example that we did, it also has a biggest power of x equal to 3. And the 3 solutions that we get, remember we had a plus or minus here. So technically we've got 0 listed twice. We're going to call that later on, we're going to call that multiplicity. And so we technically have 0, 0, and our -2/7. All right, I'll see you guys next time.